Hello, and welcome to Mind Sherlock, where every story feels like a conversation over a warm cup of coffee. Today, I bring you a brand new Sherlock Holmes mystery, filled with twists, clues, and clever deductions. Make yourself comfortable, and let's unravel the case together. And if you'd like, leave a quick comment and tell me where you're joining from. It's always a pleasure to know where our little detective community is tuning in from. Now, let's get started. It was a damp and dreary evening in early March when I found Sherlock Holmes in one of his more irritable moods. The fire crackled in the hearth, but even its warmth did little to soothe his restlessness. He paced the sitting room of 221B Baker Street, his long fingers steepled in thought, his sharp gaze flitting between the window and the clock. "I had hoped," he muttered, "that today might present something of interest. Yet it appears that London's criminal class has chosen to remain disappointingly idle." I was about to offer some remark of comfort when an unexpected knock shattered the silence. Holmes stopped mid-step, his sharp features lighting up with sudden interest. The knock was firm, deliberate, suggesting urgency without panic. "Ah," he murmured, "it seems fate has decided to provide amusement after all." Mrs. Hudson's footsteps echoed in the hallway, and moments later our visitor was ushered in. He was a man in his 50s, his evening attire rumpled, his expression one of thinly veiled distress. Holmes gestured toward the armchair opposite him. "You appear troubled, sir. I advise you to sit before your agitation forces you to collapse upon my carpet." The man sank into the chair, exhaling shakily. I studied our guest as he composed himself. His face was pale, his moustache slightly unkempt, and his trembling fingers fumbled with his gloves. Clearly, he was a man of wealth, yet something had unmoored his usual composure. "My name," he said hoarsely, "is Sir Reginald Fairbanks. I come to you, Mr. Holmes, in great distress." Holmes nodded, his gaze sweeping over the man like a hawk assessing its prey. "Indeed, a private club, an ill-advised amount of port, and a matter of some secrecy weigh upon you. But do proceed." Sir Reginald started, his eyes widening. "You know," Holmes waved a hand. "It is elementary. Now, sir, tell us what troubles you." Holmes leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "You came directly from the Diogenes Club, where you drank more than intended. You removed your signet ring, perhaps in a moment of sentimentality or discretion, but it was not for long. You are married, yet your trouble tonight does not concern your wife, at least not directly." Sir Reginald's face paled further. He glanced at his hands, where the faintest indentation remained where a ring had once been. Yes, that is true," he admitted. "But how—" Holmes allowed himself a small smile. "Ink stains on your fingers suggest recent correspondence. Yet you are no journalist. Your cravat, once neatly tied, now bears evidence of hurried readjustment. These things tell a story, Sir Reginald, but do tell us yours." The man swallowed hard, then leaned forward. "It is not a ring I have lost, Mr. Holmes," Sir Reginald said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It is a key." Holmes's brows arched. "A key, you say?" "A small brass key, one that unlocks a drawer in my study, a drawer that contains sensitive documents. If those papers were to fall into the wrong hands, my reputation, my very livelihood would be ruined." Holmes steepled his fingers once more. "And when did you last see this key?" "I had it at the club earlier this evening. When I returned home, it was gone." Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest. "A missing key, a locked drawer, and, I suspect, a truth you have yet to reveal. Sir Reginald, you have my attention." And with that, the case began. Sir Reginald shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers nervously toying with the edge of his coat. "The key," he began hesitantly, "is no ordinary one, Mr. Holmes. It belongs to a drawer in my study, one that remains locked at all times. The contents within are delicate in nature." Holmes, who had been listening with half-lidded eyes, suddenly leaned forward with keen interest. Delicate? A word often used to soften the true gravity of a situation. "I suspect we are speaking of something far beyond mere sentimental keepsakes." Sir Reginald swallowed. "You are correct, sir. The drawer contains letters, private correspondence. If they were to be discovered, the consequences would be—" He hesitated before concluding, "catastrophic." Holmes studied him, fingers steepled. "You are a man accustomed to influence, Sir Reginald, and yet you sit before me, a portrait of distress. It is not merely the contents of the drawer that alarm you, but the fact that someone, somewhere, may already possess the key to your undoing." Sir Reginald exhaled heavily, nodding. "Precisely. I must recover it before it falls into the wrong hands." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. The case had just become far more intriguing. Holmes tapped his fingers against the arm of his chair. "Let us begin with the facts. When did you last have the key in your possession?" Sir Reginald sat forward. "At the Diogenes Club this evening. I remember placing it in my waistcoat pocket before I left home. It was still there when I arrived." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "And yet it had vanished by the time you returned." "Yes. I only noticed its absence when I reached my study. I retraced my steps, searched my coat and pockets. Nothing." Holmes nodded. "Your movements at the club? Did you remain in one place, or did you engage in conversation, change seats?" Sir Reginald frowned in thought. "I mostly remained in the smoking room. I did exchange a few words with Lord Henshaw and Colonel Devereux, but I was seated throughout." Holmes's expression did not change, but I could see the cogs turning. "No unexpected jostling? No encounters with club staff that struck you as unusual?" Sir Reginald shook his head. "None that I recall. But, Mr. Holmes, if the key was taken from me at the club, it means, Sir Reginald," Holmes interrupted, "that someone knew precisely what they were looking for." There was a long silence. Holmes finally spoke, his voice quiet yet piercing. "Tell me, Sir Reginald, what exactly would these letters reveal?" The aristocrat shifted in his chair. "They are of a personal nature." Holmes gave a thin smile. "A vague answer. Allow me to be more direct. Do they concern matters of finance, politics, or—" He let the question linger. "Something more scandalous?" Sir Reginald's face tightened. "A personal indiscretion, Mr. Holmes. A series of letters exchanged some years ago. Their exposure would be disastrous." Holmes turned to me. "Watson, you observe how he evades specifics. The weight of a secret is often measured by the effort one takes to conceal it." Sir Reginald's hands clenched into fists. "I assure you, Holmes, my concern is valid. If these letters were to surface, it would ruin more than just my name." Holmes's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Then I shall require the full truth, Sir Reginald. To withhold it would be unwise, for your adversary already holds an advantage over you." The man hesitated, then exhaled. "Very well. There is another person involved, a woman of high standing. If her name were to be connected to mine in such a manner, it would destroy her utterly." Holmes nodded. "Now, at last, we begin to see the full picture." Holmes leaned back, his expression contemplative. "Now, let us consider the nature of this theft. You claim you didn't remove the key from your pocket while at the club. Correct, Sir Reginald affirmed. And yet it is gone. Holmes's gaze dropped to Sir Reginald's hands, noting the ink-stained fingers. You have written notes this evening, yet you are not a man accustomed to clerical work. That suggests urgency, not routine. Sir Reginald stiffened. I wrote a letter before leaving the club. Holmes nodded. Indeed. A farewell? An instruction? Or a warning? Sir Reginald hesitated before responding. A warning. Holmes's lips curved into a knowing smile. Fascinating. And tell me, did you address it to the same person whose name you were so keen to protect? The colour drained from Sir Reginald's face. Yes. Holmes gave a satisfied nod. Then we have our answer. This is no ordinary theft, Watson. It is an act of precision, executed with knowledge. Our culprit is not merely opportunistic, but deliberate. He steepled his fingers once more. And that means, gentlemen, that the game is truly afoot. Sir Reginald rubbed his temples. You are suggesting, Mr. Holmes, that my key was not misplaced, but deliberately stolen. Holmes regarded him coolly. Indeed. And if my suspicions are correct, this was not the act of a random pickpocket, but someone with intimate knowledge of your affairs. Sir Reginald let out a slow breath. Then I am in greater danger than I realized. That depends, Holmes said, on whether the thief intends to use the key for leverage or destruction. Tell me, this woman of high standing, has she been threatened before? Sir Reginald hesitated. Not directly, but there have been whispers, suggestions that our connection was known to certain individuals. Holmes's fingers tapped against his armrest. Then it is clear. Your letters are no longer a secret. Someone has taken an interest, and I suspect their intentions are far from benevolent. Watson turned to our client. And this key, Sir Reginald. Does anyone else know of its importance? A pause. My wife. Holmes's gaze sharpened. Ah, now that is an interesting detail indeed. Holmes rose to his feet, his decision made. Sir Reginald, I shall take your case. But understand this. If you wish to retrieve your key before irreparable harm is done, I require absolute honesty from this moment forward. Sir Reginald nodded vigorously. You have my word, Mr. Holmes. Holmes retrieved his coat from the stand, his movements brisk. Watson, fetch your revolver. I suspect before this night is over, we shall find ourselves in need of it. I obeyed without question. The case had begun in earnest, and in Holmes's keen eyes I saw the glint of excitement, the promise of a mystery worthy of his talents. The cold night air was bracing as Holmes and I stepped out onto Baker Street, Sir Reginald's carriage already waiting. Holmes had said little since accepting the case, his sharp features set in deep contemplation. Where shall we begin? I asked, pulling my coat tighter against the chill. We retrace his steps, Holmes replied. The key was last seen at the Diogenes Club. If it vanished thereafter, then the trail begins there. Sir Reginald, still visibly distressed, fidgeted beside me. You do not suspect. I merely misplaced it. Holmes's lips curled faintly. You would not be here if that were the case. No, Sir Reginald, this was a calculated act. As the carriage rolled forward, Holmes tapped his fingers lightly against his knee. It is curious, he murmured. A key stolen, but no attempt yet to use it. That tells us something, Watson. And what is that? I asked. That our thief has patience. And patience, he said, with the gleam of a predator sensing its prey, is often far more dangerous than desperation. I shuddered, though whether from the cold or Holmes's words, I could not tell. The Diogenes Club was an institution of silence and solemnity, its members priding themselves on the art of conversation avoidance. It was a place where, as Holmes had once described, men might go for the privilege of not speaking to one another. We entered through the heavy oak doors, where a footman directed us towards Mycroft Holmes, who sat in his customary chair by the fireplace. He glanced up as we approached, his expression one of mild amusement. "Ah, Sherlock, I assume this is about Sir Reginald's predicament." Holmes did not appear surprised. "Your sources remain efficient, Mycroft." His brother gave a faint smile. "It is hardly a challenge when half the club is whispering about it. An aristocrat losing a key to his private drawer. Naturally, people are interested." Holmes took the seat opposite him. "Then you know who might have taken it?" Mycroft exhaled, studying Sir Reginald with a look of mild disapproval. "I know that his troubles extend beyond this lost key. There are forces at play here, Sherlock, ones that reach into political circles. If that drawer contains what I suspect, then this is no ordinary theft." Sir Reginald's face drained of colour. "You mean—" "I mean," Mycroft interrupted, "that this is not the work of a common pickpocket. If someone took your key, it is because they knew precisely what they were after. And that, gentlemen, is far more concerning." Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest. "Then our next step is clear. We must see the scene of the crime itself." Sir Reginald's residence was a stately home on Cavendish Square, and as we arrived, the butler greeted us with an air of controlled concern. We were swiftly led to his study, a room of dark wood and heavy drapery, its very atmosphere steeped in secrets. Holmes moved without hesitation to the desk, his fingers tracing the ornate brass handle of the locked drawer. He inspected the keyhole closely, his keen eyes narrowing. "Interesting," he murmured. "There are fresh scratches here, but they are shallow, hesitant." Sir Reginald peered over his shoulder. "Does that mean someone attempted to open it?" "Indeed," Holmes said, "but they lacked the proper tools or confidence. This was no professional burglar. This was someone testing the waters." He turned sharply. "Who else resides in this house?" Sir Reginald hesitated. "My wife. The servants." Holmes steepled his fingers. "And do you trust them?" Sir Reginald's response was delayed by a fraction too long. Holmes nodded to himself. "Then we have much to consider." With that, he turned to me, his voice brisk. "Watson, I believe the real game has just begun." As we sat in the dimly lit study, the heavy silence was broken by the entrance of Mrs. Fairbanks. She was a tall woman with an air of quiet composure, her expression betraying neither concern nor curiosity at the unexpected intrusion of detectives into her home. She glanced at her husband with an unreadable gaze before addressing Holmes. "I assume, Mr. Holmes, that my husband has misplaced something of value and seeks your assistance in recovering it." Her tone was cool, almost disinterested. It was not the reaction of a woman whose husband faced ruin. Holmes regarded her with mild amusement. "Your assumption is correct, madam, though I find your lack of alarm rather fascinating." She smiled faintly. "A lifetime spent in society, Mr. Holmes, teaches one to remain composed in all circumstances." Holmes inclined his head. "Indeed. And yet, composure is often a mask. Some wear it better than others." I watched her carefully. There was no sign of distress, no indication of guilt or apprehension. If she knew of the missing key, she was an exceptional actress. Holmes allowed the moment to stretch before rising abruptly. "Madam, I thank you for your time." She merely nodded, her eyes betraying not the slightest flicker of concern. As she departed, Holmes turned to me with the ghost of a smile. "Watson, it is always a pleasure to observe a true master at work. Shall we proceed?" As we prepared to leave the study, the butler, an elderly man with an air of quiet efficiency, cleared his throat hesitantly. "Begging your pardon, Sir Reginald, but there was an unusual caller earlier this evening." Holmes immediately turned his full attention to the man. "Unusual in what way?" The butler shifted uncomfortably. "A gentleman, sir, well dressed, but not quite of the class we typically receive. He was most particular in his inquiries." Sir Reginald stiffened. "What inquiries?" The butler cast a wary glance at Holmes before answering. "He asked whether you were home, and whether you had been at the Diogenes Club this evening. He did not give a name, but he left soon after being informed you were out." Holmes nodded. "And his manner? Did he seem nervous, forceful?" The butler frowned. "Neither, sir. He was quite calm, almost indifferent." Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his lips pressing into a thin line. A well-dressed man inquiring about Sir Reginald's movements, without leaving a name. Curious indeed. Sir Reginald's expression was troubled. "You think this man has my key?" Holmes merely smiled. "I think, Sir Reginald, that we are not the only ones playing this game." As we stepped out into the corridor, Holmes halted abruptly and turned to me with an expectant look. "Watson, I find myself in need of a most trusted ally for a delicate matter. Would you be so kind as to oblige?" I straightened. "Of course, Holmes. What do you need?" His gaze flickered toward the staircase where Mrs. Fairbanks had disappeared moments earlier. "I require you to observe our hostess. There is something about her composure that does not sit well with me." I frowned. "You suspect her?" Holmes smiled faintly. "Suspect? No, Watson. I suspect she is entirely too indifferent, and that is a thing worth noting." He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Mingle with the household. Speak to the staff. If there is anything unusual about Mrs. Fairbanks's behaviour, I trust you shall uncover it." I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon me. "And what shall you be doing in the meantime?" Holmes adjusted his gloves. "Why, my dear fellow, I have an appointment with a certain well-dressed gentleman who seems to have taken an interest in our client's affairs." And with that, he was gone, leaving me alone in the corridors of Fairbanks Manor, where secrets lay waiting to be unearthed. Holmes sat in Sir Reginald's study, his sharp eyes scanning the room with the air of a man piecing together an invisible puzzle. He drummed his fingers lightly against the desk before speaking. "The key was not lost, Sir Reginald," he said at last. "It was stolen." Sir Reginald's brow furrowed. "But how can you be certain?" Holmes gestured toward the desk. "A common thief would not take a key without first ascertaining what it unlocks. Yet, we see evidence that someone attempted to force the drawer open. That suggests hesitation. No professional would risk discovery by tampering with the lock when the key was already in their possession." I nodded, understanding his logic. "So, the thief was not after the key itself, but what it protected." "Precisely," Holmes said. "And yet, no attempt has been made to use it, at least, not yet." Sir Reginald's face paled. "Then someone is waiting for the right moment." Holmes's gaze sharpened. "Or perhaps, Sir Reginald, they are waiting for you to make a mistake." Sir Reginald swallowed hard. "What do you suggest?" "I suggest we discover precisely who has taken an interest in your affairs, and I believe we may already have our first suspect." He turned to the butler, who had been lingering near the door. "Tell me, my good man, have there been any unfamiliar visitors as of late?" The butler hesitated, then gave a slow nod. Now that you mention it, sir, there was one. Holmes straightened, his expression keen. Describe him. The butler frowned in thought. He was well dressed, sir, but not quite comfortable in his attire, as though he had borrowed wealth rather than inherited it. A gentleman, or at least trying to appear one, but with the air of someone accustomed to back alleys more than ballrooms. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Ah, a wolf in borrowed finery. Sir Reginald turned to the butler. What did he want? He inquired about your whereabouts, sir. Asked whether you had been at the club that evening. He was very particular about it. Holmes glanced at me with satisfaction. Watson, does this not strike you as curious? A stranger taking interest in Sir Reginald's movements on the very night his key disappears? I frowned. A coincidence too great to ignore. Sir Reginald looked uneasy. Do you know who he is? Holmes gave a slow, deliberate nod. I believe so. The description fits a certain Henry Elridge, a man with a talent for extracting wealth from the misfortunes of others. Sir Reginald stiffened. A blackmailer. The very best, Holmes confirmed. Elridge does not steal, he waits. He allows his prey to entangle themselves further until they are left with no choice but to meet his price. Sir Reginald's voice was hoarse. Then he has my key. Holmes smiled. Possibly, but there is only one way to find out. Holmes took a sheet of paper from the desk and dipped a pen into the inkwell. His movements were brisk, precise, and filled with purpose. If Henry Elridge is involved, he will not make the first move, he remarked. He prefers to let his victims squirm before tightening his grip, but we shall not afford him that luxury. He scribbled a few short lines before handing the note to Sir Reginald. You will send this to Elridge's usual haunts, a discreet message implying your willingness to negotiate for the key's return. Sir Reginald read the note aloud. I am prepared to discuss terms. Discretion is essential. Meet me at midnight at the abandoned warehouse by the docks. Holmes leaned back. Elridge will believe you are desperate. He will come. I frowned. But what if he does not have the key? Holmes's smile was razor sharp. Then he will know who does. Sir Reginald's hands trembled slightly as he folded the letter. And if he refuses? Holmes rose, retrieving his coat. Then we shall pay him a visit ourselves. But let us allow the bait to settle first. I watched him, the familiar thrill of the chase beginning to stir. Holmes had set the trap. Now we need only wait for the blackmailer to step into it. Holmes and I arrived at the meeting place just before midnight. The docks stretched out before us, quiet but for the gentle lapping of water against the wooden pilings. A figure loomed in the shadows, his stance relaxed, but watchful. Henry Elridge was a man of middling height, dressed in a fine coat that did not quite fit his frame. His gloved hands toyed with a cigarette, his sharp eyes flicking between us. I must say, Sir Reginald, I expected you alone, he drawled. Holmes stepped forward. Sir Reginald is not in the habit of negotiating with jackals, Mr. Elridge, but I, on the other hand, find them quite fascinating. Elridge exhaled a stream of smoke, feigning indifference. You've gone through quite the trouble to find me. What is it you want? Holmes smiled. A missing key. I believe it has come into your possession. Elridge chuckled. And if it had, do you take me for a fool? A man like me does not play his hand so soon. Holmes studied him a moment before speaking. No, Mr. Elridge, but you are not holding the winning hand either. Elridge's expression flickered, ever so slightly. Holmes caught it. He took a slow step forward. You were hired to steal the key, weren't you? But someone got to it first. The blackmailer's jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty creep into his confident demeanour. Holmes nodded, satisfied. So then, let us discuss the person who outplayed you. Elridge exhaled sharply, tossing his cigarette to the ground. You're an observant man, Mr. Holmes. I'll give you that. Holmes inclined his head. A compliment, though I suspect not freely given. Now tell me, who beat you to the prize? Elridge hesitated, his fingers twitching at his side. A woman, he muttered. Didn't get a good look at her face, but she was fast, knew what she was after. Holmes folded his arms. Curious, you, a man known for prying into the affairs of others, failed to identify your competition. The blackmailer scowled. I wasn't expecting company. I slipped into the house just as planned, but by the time I reached the study, the key was already gone. Sir Reginald, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. A woman? Are you certain? Elridge scoffed. She moved like a ghost. But yes, I'm sure. Holmes turned slightly, a glint of satisfaction in his eye. That simplifies matters greatly. We need not search the underworld for our culprit, Watson. She has been under our noses the entire time. I started. You don't mean... Holmes gave a small, knowing smile. Come, Watson. It appears we must pay another visit to Fairbanks Manor. Elridge, his moment of use having passed, muttered a curse under his breath. Holmes gave him a final glance. I suggest you seek employment elsewhere, Mr. Elridge. Blackmail, it seems, does not suit you. And with that, we departed. We arrived at Fairbanks Manor in the early hours of the morning. Holmes wasted no time in requesting an audience with Mrs. Fairbanks, and she met us in the drawing room, her composure as carefully measured as before. Holmes regarded her for a moment before speaking. It is a rare thing to meet an individual who can match my patience, Mrs. Fairbanks. But I must congratulate you. You played the game well. She arched a brow. Mr. Holmes, I confess I do not know what you mean. Holmes's smile was thin. Come now. The act no longer serves you. We know you took the key. For the first time I saw her mask falter. It was the briefest hesitation, a slight intake of breath, a tightening of her grip upon the chair, but it was enough. I should ask that you be careful with your accusations, Mr. Holmes. Holmes chuckled. Oh, I am always careful. And I am careful now when I say that you knew of your husband's indiscretions long before he ever suspected. You watched, you waited, and when the opportunity arose, you took the key before it could be used against you. Sir Reginald turned to his wife, his voice low. Is this true? She did not answer. She did not need to. Holmes had already won. Holmes folded his hands behind his back. Your secret is safe, for now. But let this serve as a warning, Mrs. Fairbanks. You and your husband have far more dangerous enemies than each other. With that, we took our leave, the mystery solved, but the consequences left hanging in the air like an unfinished game of chess. Holmes sat at Sir Reginald's desk, his fingers steepled as he regarded the troubled aristocrat with an expression of quiet amusement. Sir Reginald, I require your assistance in setting the stage for our culprit's next move. Sir Reginald, still pale from our recent revelations, nodded hesitantly. Anything, Mr. Holmes. What must I do? Holmes dipped a pen into the inkwell and began writing swiftly. You will send a note to your wife, informing her that the key has been recovered and that you intend to review the contents of the drawer at first light. He handed the paper to Sir Reginald. Word it in your own style, but maintain the essence of the message. Sir Reginald frowned as he read the note. You believe this will provoke her into action? Holmes smiled faintly. My dear sir, your wife is an intelligent woman. She stole the key with a purpose, but she has not yet acted upon it. The fear that you may uncover her secret before she can maneuver her next move will be too much for her to bear. She will act tonight." I watched as Sir Reginald penned the note, sealing it with a trembling hand before instructing a servant to deliver it to his wife's chambers. Holmes, satisfied, turned to me. "Now, Watson, we must ensure we are well positioned when the lady makes her move." I understood immediately. Holmes intended to observe Mrs. Fairbanks firsthand, to watch her reaction, and, if our suspicions were correct, to catch her in the act. Holmes checked his watch. "We shall give her time to contemplate. And then, my dear Watson, we shall see whether my hypothesis proves true." The house had long since fallen into silence when Holmes and I took our positions in the shadowed corridor outside Sir Reginald's study. The only illumination came from a single candle left burning on the hall table, casting flickering shapes against the walls. Holmes, ever patient, stood motionless beside me, his breathing slow and deliberate. "She will come," he whispered. I was about to ask whether he was certain when a faint creak echoed from the far end of the hall. My pulse quickened as I saw a figure moving cautiously in the dim light. Mrs. Fairbanks was clad in a dark robe, her bare feet making no sound as she approached. She carried something in her hand, a small brass object that caught the candlelight for the briefest moment. The key. She paused outside the study door, glancing around with the sharp awareness of someone who had much to lose. Holmes barely breathed beside me, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. With a soft click, she inserted the key into the lock and twisted it slowly, pushing the door open just wide enough to slip inside. Holmes touched my arm lightly, signaling for patience. We waited for the span of 3 long breaths before he moved. Silent as a wraith, Holmes stepped forward, and I followed. The study door stood ajar, the flicker of a lamp within, revealing the silhouette of Mrs. Fairbanks as she knelt before the desk. Her fingers fumbled at the drawer, trembling with urgency. Holmes's voice, when it came, was low and sharp. "A bold move, Mrs. Fairbanks." She gasped, spinning toward us, the key still clenched in her fist. For the first time since we met her, her composure cracked. For a fleeting moment, Mrs. Fairbanks did not speak. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes darting between Holmes, myself, and the half-open drawer. Then, as though she had gathered herself, she straightened, the key disappearing into the folds of her robe. "I do not know what you mean, Mr. Holmes," she said smoothly. "I came only to check whether my husband had misplaced something." Holmes smiled, though there was no humour in it. "A most commendable effort, madam, but I fear the evidence is against you. You stole the key from your husband. You waited, hoping to act before he discovered its absence. And now, when I led you to believe he had already recovered it, you could not resist moving first." She remained silent. Holmes stepped closer, his voice a quiet murmur. "The scratches on the keyhole showed an amateur's hand, yet you made no further attempt after your initial failure. That tells me you were not acting out of impulse but calculation. You stole the key, but you hesitated. Why?" Her mask wavered for only an instant. Holmes continued, relentless. "Because you never intended to use the letters yourself. You meant to trade them." He tilted his head. "Perhaps to Henry Elridge?" A muscle in her jaw tightened. Sir Reginald, who had joined us, stared at his wife in horror. "Margaret, tell me it isn't true." She lifted her chin. "And if it is?" Holmes turned away slightly, as though considering. "Your situation is precarious, madam, but not without remedy. You acted to protect yourself. I suspect you have your reasons." Mrs. Fairbanks's expression flickered, perhaps with defiance, perhaps with regret, but she said nothing. Holmes exhaled softly. "The key, if you please." She hesitated a moment longer, then, without a word, reached into her robe and placed the brass key into Holmes' outstretched palm. Holmes regarded it for a moment before handing it to Sir Reginald. "I suggest, Sir Reginald, that you and your wife have much to discuss." Then, with a glance at me, he turned toward the door. "Come, Watson, our work here is done." Mrs. Fairbanks stood before us, the flickering lamp casting long shadows across her pale face. She didn't shrink from our gaze, nor did she attempt to deny the accusation. Instead, she exhaled softly, her fingers tightening around the folds of her robe. "I suppose," she murmured, "there is no point in feigning innocence." Sir Reginald, still reeling from the revelation, stepped forward. "Margaret, why?" His voice trembled between disbelief and wounded pride. "I have been a fool, yes, but never cruel to you. Why betray me in such a manner?" A bitter smile touched her lips. "A betrayal, is it? And what, pray, was yours? A string of indiscretions, whispered rumours, and secret rendezvous." She turned to Holmes, her voice cold and steady. "You see, Mr. Holmes, I did not steal the key to ruin my husband. I stole it to protect myself." Holmes nodded, as if he had already come to this conclusion. "You feared what would happen should the letters fall into the wrong hands." "Feared?" she scoffed. "I knew. The moment I learned of them, I understood my position. A wife in name only, with no influence, no security. If those letters were used against him, do you think he would shield me? No, Mr. Holmes, he would save himself." Sir Reginald's face darkened. "That is not true." Holmes lifted a hand. "And yet she could not afford to take that risk." His gaze flickered toward her. "So, you took the key, but you did not destroy the letters. Why?" A silence stretched between us before she answered. "Because simply keeping them was not enough." Holmes's expression did not change, but I saw the glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Number U needed something more, and in that moment, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Holmes stepped closer, his sharp gaze fixed upon Mrs. Fairbanks. "You did not steal the key merely to keep those letters safe. You meant to use them." She did not deny it. "You were not content with waiting in fear," Holmes continued. "You saw an opportunity. If the letters could ruin your husband, they could just as easily be leveraged for your own benefit. And who better to facilitate such an arrangement than Henry Elridge?" Sir Reginald turned to his wife, his face drained of all colour. "You went to him?" Mrs. Fairbanks met his gaze unflinchingly. "You gave me no choice." Holmes gave a small nod. A well-calculated move. Elridge would have paid handsomely for those letters, or found someone who would. In return, you would have had the means to escape this marriage entirely, on your terms, not his. Sir Reginald's fists clenched at his sides. "You plan to leave me?" "I plan to survive," she corrected. "And without those letters, I had no means to ensure my own security. What other recourse did I have?" Holmes watched her in quiet admiration. "A dangerous game, Mrs. Fairbanks, and yet, despite your caution, you miscalculated." Her lips parted slightly. "Miscalculated." Holmes allowed himself the faintest of smiles. "Elridge never had the key." The silence in the room grew thick. He would have strung you along, perhaps even turned the letters against you in the end. You placed your trust in a man whose trade is deception. For the first time that evening, Mrs. Fairbanks' composure wavered. Holmes turned to Sir Reginald, offering the key. Your letters are secure for now, but I suggest you both consider how easily trust can be misplaced. With that, Holmes turned on his heel. Come, Watson, I believe we have done enough. Sir Reginald's face, already pale from the night's revelations, seemed to drain of all remaining colour. He looked at his wife as though seeing her for the first time. You were the one? His voice was barely above a whisper. Mrs. Fairbanks met his gaze without flinching. Who better? She replied coolly. Did you think your secrets would remain hidden forever? That you alone had the power to wield scandal as a weapon? You taught me well, Reginald. Holmes watched the exchange with the detached interest of a scholar observing a rare specimen under glass. A most unusual case, he mused. A man who feared blackmail, only to find the conspirator under his own roof. It is an elegant irony. Sir Reginald turned to Holmes, his expression one of helpless rage. You knew. Holmes nodded. I suspected. The signs were there. Her indifference when you first brought the matter to me, the ease with which she moved through this house, the certainty that no external force had yet acted against you. This was not the work of an outsider, but of someone who already held all the cards. Mrs. Fairbanks's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. And yet, you only acted once you knew I had no more moves left to make. Holmes gave a small, polite bow. I detest unfinished games, madam. Sir Reginald sagged against the desk, his voice hollow. So this was my undoing all along. Holmes exhaled softly. No, Sir Reginald. Your undoing was believing that trust, once broken, could so easily be reclaimed. Holmes retrieved the brass key from where it lay abandoned on the desk, rolling it between his fingers, as though measuring its weight, not merely in metal, but in consequence. With a flick of his wrist, he held it out to Sir Reginald. I believe this belongs to you, he said. Sir Reginald hesitated before taking it, his grip unsteady. And what would you have me do, Holmes? His voice was tight, wearied by betrayal. Holmes raised a brow. That, Sir Reginald, is a matter of personal discretion. The letters remain locked away, but whether you choose to burn them or continue clinging to their existence as a false sense of power, that is your decision. He turned slightly, glancing toward Mrs. Fairbanks. Though I suspect the true question is not what you will do with the letters, but what you will do with each other. A silence hung in the air, thick and weighted. The damage was done. Whether the Fairbanks marriage would survive, it was another matter entirely. As we made our way toward the door, I could not help but voice my thoughts. You ensured that no scandal would come of this, Holmes. But at what cost? Holmes paused at the threshold, his expression unreadable. A marriage built on deceit is no marriage at all, Watson. I merely exposed the cracks. We stepped into the cold night air, leaving behind a house that no longer held any secrets, only regrets. The journey back to Baker Street was made in silence. Sir Reginald sat opposite us in the cab, his hands clasped together, his face drawn and weary. The night's revelations had stripped him of the arrogance he once carried, leaving only a man whose world had been irreversibly shaken. As we ascended the familiar stairs of 221B, Mrs. Hudson barely had time to step aside before Holmes ushered us inside. He gestured toward the chair by the fire. Sit, Sir Reginald. I suspect you have much to contemplate. The baronet lowered himself into the seat, exhaling heavily. Holmes, I must know. How did you see through it all? I was blind to it. Holmes moved to the mantel, lighting his pipe with a practiced ease. Not blind, Sir Reginald, merely unwilling to observe. Sir Reginald looked up sharply, But Holmes waved his hand. You sought an enemy in the shadows while the real danger sat at your table each evening. But as I told you before, no crime is committed in isolation. Every act leaves its trace, and every secret, no matter how carefully guarded, finds its way into the light. Sir Reginald swallowed hard. And what light have you uncovered, Mr. Holmes? Holmes turned, his sharp gaze resting upon him. Let us begin then with the first and simplest of clues. Holmes took his familiar place by the fireplace, the glow of the embers casting shifting shadows upon his face. The case, he began, was never truly about the key, but about who desired it most. Consider, Sir Reginald, the first great inconsistency. If a common thief had stolen it, why did they not use it immediately? Sir Reginald frowned. I do not know. Because, Holmes continued smoothly, the thief was not an outsider. They had time. They could afford to wait. Which brings us to the drawer itself. You saw the scratches by the keyhole? Yes, he said slowly. A sign of hesitation, Holmes said. Someone attempted to open it but did not yet possess the nerve to go through with it. A burglar would have forced the lock or taken the drawer itself. This was the work of someone with access to the house, someone who could come and go without suspicion. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Your wife, Sir Reginald. Sir Reginald inhaled sharply. Then, Holmes continued, there was her demeanour. From the moment we arrived at your home, she displayed neither shock nor concern. You were in distress, yet she remained composed. Indifference is often the surest sign of concealed knowledge. He took a slow draw from his pipe before continuing. Finally, there were your own hands, Sir Reginald, stained with ink. You had written something in haste, moments before leaving the club. A warning, perhaps. A desperate attempt to salvage a situation already spiralling beyond your control. Sir Reginald's lips parted, but he did not speak. Holmes gave a small, knowing smile. You see, every clue pointed in the same direction. The key was never truly lost. It had simply found its way into the hands of the one person who understood its value far better than you did. Sir Reginald leaned forward, his face haggard. And now? What happens now? Holmes regarded him with measured coolness. That, Sir Reginald, is entirely dependent upon you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the brass key, holding it between his fingers. This key, and all it represents, is now back in your possession. But consider carefully. What has it cost you? Sir Reginald swallowed. My wife. She was willing to betray me. Holmes inclined his head. And do you truly believe it was a decision made in haste? No, Sir Reginald. This was not the work of a desperate woman, but of a calculated mind. Your affairs may have been whispered behind closed doors, but she listened, she waited, and when the opportunity arose, she struck. Sir Reginald ran a hand over his face. I was careless. Holmes's expression darkened. Careless indeed. A man in your position cannot afford to be reckless with his secrets. For secrets, like debts, have a way of compounding until the weight is unbearable. You sought to control the scandal, but in truth, you were already at its mercy. He placed the key upon the table between them. If you continue on this path, Sir Reginald, I can assure you, there will come a time when no key, no wealth, and no influence will be enough to unlock the doors that will close upon you. Sir Reginald's gaze lingered on the small object before him, as though seeing it for the first time. Holmes turned to me, his voice quieter now. Come, Watson, I believe this matter is settled. And as we stepped out into the cold London night, I could not help but reflect upon the strange, twisting nature of the case. The lost key had been found, But the greater question remained. Had Sir Reginald truly learned the cost of his secrets? Or had we merely delayed the inevitable? Sir Reginald sat motionless, his fingers clenching the recovered key, as though by gripping it tightly enough, he might regain the control he had so thoroughly lost. His face, once flushed with aristocratic confidence, had taken on a sallow pallor. He had come to Baker Street hoping for salvation, but what he had found instead was something far worse, an unvarnished truth. "Holmes," he said at last, his voice barely above a whisper, "is there any way to undo what has already been done?" Holmes finished for him, his gaze sharp. "No, Sir Reginald. Your wife may have failed in her scheme, but the mere fact that she attempted it should give you pause." Sir Reginald swallowed hard. She would have destroyed me." Holmes exhaled a thin stream of smoke. "Come now. You of all men should understand the principle of self-preservation. A woman left without options will always find a way to create them. You merely failed to anticipate that your wife was as capable of strategy as yourself." Sir Reginald's lips pressed into a thin line. "And what do you suggest I do?" Holmes regarded him coolly. "That, Sir Reginald, is not my concern. You came to me for the truth, and now you have it. What you choose to do with it is entirely your own affair." For a long moment, Sir Reginald said nothing. Then, with a slow, defeated nod, he rose from his chair. The weight of the evening hung upon him, pressing down on his once proud shoulders as he walked toward the door. At the threshold, he hesitated. "Holmes," he said, not turning back. "Thank you." Holmes merely inclined his head. Sir Reginald stepped out into the night, disappearing into the fog of Baker Street, a man reduced to shadows. I watched the door close behind Sir Reginald before exhaling deeply. "Well, Holmes," I said, settling back into my chair, "that was an extraordinary case." Holmes merely stretched his legs toward the fire, his expression unreadable. "What I cannot quite understand," I continued, "is whether you knew from the very start." Holmes raised a brow. "The very start?" "Yes," I said. "When Sir Reginald first arrived, did you already suspect his wife?" Holmes gave a small, amused smile. "Watson, if I had a shilling for every time you asked me that question, I might retire from detection altogether." I huffed. "And yet you never give me a straight answer." Holmes chuckled. "Very well. No, I didn't know with certainty from the beginning. But I observed what was in plain sight. A man who was afraid, but not of an enemy he could name. A theft that bore the marks of hesitation rather than desperation. A wife who, when presented with her husband's peril, showed neither surprise nor distress." He tapped his fingers together. "The truth, my dear Watson, is rarely as well hidden as people believe. It merely requires the right perspective." I frowned. "And that perspective, I suppose, belongs to you?" Holmes smiled, his eyes gleaming. "Naturally." I shook my head, unable to suppress a chuckle. "You make it sound so simple, Holmes." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharp with amusement. "It is simple, Watson, once one removes the distractions." "And what distractions would those be?" Holmes gestured vaguely. "Emotion, assumptions, the tendency to see what one wishes, rather than what is." He took a slow draw from his pipe, then gave me a sidelong glance. "Tell me, Watson, what was the mystery in this case?" I frowned. "The key, of course, and the letters it protected." Holmes smirked. "No, Watson. The key was merely the excuse. The true mystery was the people who surrounded it, their desires, their deceptions, their fears." He exhaled, the smoke curling toward the ceiling. The key to any mystery, my dear Watson, is never the object itself, but rather who desires it most. With that, he fell into a thoughtful silence, his fingers tracing idle patterns along the arm of his chair. I leaned back as well, content in the knowledge that for now, the game was once again at an end. With the case resolved and Sir Reginald departed into the fog of Baker Street, Holmes and I returned to the quiet refuge of our sitting room. The fire crackled low in the grate, casting long shadows across the walls, and the familiar scent of Holmes' pipe tobacco soon filled the air. He sank into his chair with an air of satisfaction, stretching his legs toward the fire as he reached for his pipe. "A most diverting puzzle, Watson," he murmured. "A case of keys and locked drawers, but in truth, it was never about the object itself, merely the desires and fears it represented." I settled into my own chair, feeling the exhaustion of the night's events settling over me. "And yet," I said, watching as he exhaled a thin plume of smoke, "the outcome was not entirely satisfying." Holmes arched an eyebrow. "Not satisfying. We recovered the key, exposed the culprit, and prevented a scandal." I sighed. "Yes, but at what cost? There was no true villain here, Holmes. Only betrayal and regret." Holmes tilted his head slightly, considering my words. "Ah, Watson," he said, tapping his pipe against the arm of his chair. "You mistake resolution for justice." I leaned forward, staring into the fire. "Do you believe Sir Reginald has learned his lesson, Holmes? That he will change?" Holmes let out a short laugh, more breath than sound. "A man may swear reform when he stands upon the precipice, Watson, but once he steps away, he rarely treads a different path." I frowned. "Then what was the point of all this? If he is doomed to repeat his mistakes?" Holmes regarded me with mild amusement. "The point, my dear Watson, is that human nature is infinitely predictable. People deceive, betray, and scheme, not always out of malice, but out of necessity. Sir Reginald is a man accustomed to control, and when control eludes him, he scrambles to regain it. That is his nature." I exhaled. "Then what of Mrs. Fairbanks? Will she attempt another scheme?" Holmes tapped his fingers together. "She is a woman who has learned her own power. Whether she wields it again is another matter entirely." I shook my head. "A grim outlook." Holmes smiled. "A practical one." Holmes tapped the ash from his pipe and leaned back into his chair. "You are too sentimental, Watson." I gave him a weary look. "And you are too detached." He chuckled. "Perhaps, but I find that sentiment clouds judgment. We do not solve mysteries to change men, Watson. We solve them because they are puzzles waiting to be unravelled. That is all." I watched him for a long moment. "So, you took no satisfaction in this case?" Holmes smiled. "On the contrary, I found it most delightful. A locked drawer, a missing key, a clever deception, the mechanics of the mind laid bare for observation." He exhaled a thin plume of smoke. "Men like Sir Reginald rarely change, but their schemes never fail to amuse." The room had fallen into a comfortable silence when there came a sharp knock at the door. Mrs. Hudson entered, a telegram in her hand. "For you, Mr. Holmes," she said, setting it on the table. Holmes plucked it up, his sharp eyes scanning the message. A slow smile crept across his face. "Well?" I asked, curiosity piqued. He tossed the telegram onto the table. "It appears we have been summoned, Watson. A rather curious affair involving a missing heir, a cryptic note, and a fortune at stake." I groaned. "Not another locked room mystery, I hope." Holmes grinned. "If it were simple, they would not require Sherlock Holmes." And with that, He rose, already reaching for his coat. The game, as always, was afoot. Holmes stretched out in his chair, the glow of the fire casting flickering shadows along the walls of 221 B. Baker Street. He exhaled a thin wisp of smoke from his pipe, watching it curl toward the ceiling with the same quiet satisfaction he took in solving a particularly complex puzzle. "Well, Watson," he said at last, "another case resolved. And yet, I suspect you find the conclusion unsatisfying." I leaned forward, studying my friend. "It is not the resolution that troubles me, Holmes. It is the inevitability of it. Sir Reginald sought to control his fate, yet it was his own arrogance that led him to ruin. And Mrs. Fairbanks, she was not the villain he imagined, merely a woman protecting herself in a world that left her few choices." Holmes nodded. "Precisely. The most dangerous adversaries are not those who act out of malice, but those who act out of necessity. Desperation and intelligence are a formidable combination." I sighed. "Then tell me, Holmes, who in the end was truly to blame?" Holmes gave a wry smile. "Ah, Watson, that is the very essence of the mystery. A key is only as valuable as the secrets it protects. But tell me, was it the key that was lost, or merely the illusion of control? What do you think was Sir Reginald's greatest mistake? Was it trusting the wrong person, or believing he could keep his secrets forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery, don't forget to subscribe for more Sherlock Holmes cases like this video and share it with fellow detective fiction lovers. After all, the game is always afoot.